The world feels like it's been turned upside down, and I find myself caught in the middle of a storm I never imagined would brew at this stage of my life. It's not the kind of storm that comes with thunder and lightning, but one that churns and rumbles quietly, deep inside, leaving me to question every decision I've made. I wonder, am I truly the villain in this story for closing our joint account just before his grand escape to Italy? The journey began over 5 years ago, when my marriage took a turn I never anticipated. My ex-husband and I had shared a life, dreams, and even a bank account. But somewhere along the way, the threads holding us together started to fray. Our separation was not a clean slice. It was a jagged tear that left both of us bleeding emotionally, financially, and physically. The kind of separation that doesn't just end, but lingers, casting a shadow over every attempt to move forward. During our marriage, we did what many couples do. We opened a joint bank account. It was a symbol of unity, a shared pot for our expenses, a testament to our partnership. But when the marriage ended, the account became more of a shackle than a symbol. I wanted my name removed, a simple act that would signify a final step towards independence. He, however, saw it differently. He wanted to keep the account open, insisting it was easier for his financial activities. His vehicle payments, payroll deposits, and other transactions flowed through this account like a lifeline, and he wasn't prepared to sever it. For years, I tried to untangle myself from this financial bind. Direct conversations, negotiations through our attorneys, and even chance meetings when we happened to be in the same city, all led to the same stone wall. He refused, and I was left to stew in a mix of frustration and helplessness. It was as if he was holding on to this one connection, refusing to let me fully escape from a marriage that had already ended. Then came the fateful day. I was in the city, a rare occurrence since both of us had taken to living in more rural, separated spaces. The city, with its bustling streets and constant noise, was a stark contrast to the quiet life I had carved out for myself. It was on this day that the bank called. Their message was simple, yet devastating. The joint account was overdrawn by nearly 950s. My heart sank. The thought of this affecting my credit score sent a chill down my spine. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my chest, a feeling I'd come to associate with him. I acted swiftly, reaching out to my ex-husband. Texts, calls, anything to get his attention, but his response was as predictable as it was infuriating. He was too busy to deal with it. The words felt like a slap, a reminder of the countless times he had dismissed my concerns, my needs, my very existence. Standing in the bank, I weighed my options. I could do nothing, let the account fester like an open wound, or I could pay the overdraft and close the account. The latter meant dipping into my savings, money I'd carefully put aside for our children's activities, a fund of hope for a brighter, more stable future. But the thought of letting this hang over me, of letting him have this power, was unbearable. So, with a heavy heart and a resolve I didn't quite believe in, I paid the overdraft. Nearly $970 gone in an instant, my hard-earned savings swallowed up by a decision made in the heat of desperation and practicality. And then I closed the account. It was a decision marked by the quiet click of a keyboard, a transaction that signified the end of a long, arduous chapter. My ex-husband's vacation plans had been the final straw. He was set to leave for Italy the very next day, a trip he had mentioned almost casually, as if it wasn't a big deal. But to me, it was. It was a reminder of his freedom, his ability to move on while I was left to pick up the pieces. Closing the account meant he had just one day to open a new one, to transfer his debits, to rearrange his financial life. Part of me felt guilty, knowing this would inconvenience him, but another part felt a sense of justice, a reclaiming of my own life. In the aftermath, I grappled with my decision. Was I the villain for taking control, for finally putting my needs and the needs of my children first? Or was I simply standing up for myself in a situation where I had long been sidelined? The questions lingered, echoing in the quiet of my rural home, as I tried to find peace in the choices I'd made. Reflecting on the years gone by, I realized how much of myself I'd lost in the messiness of it all. The woman who had once dreamed of a partnership built on mutual respect and love was now someone who had to fight for the simplest of freedoms. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards reclaiming that woman, towards piecing together a version of myself that was whole and unburdened by the past. In the end, I am left with the hope that this decision, though painful, was necessary. A step towards a future where I am no longer defined by the remnants of a broken marriage, but by the strength I've found in moving forward. As I sat quietly in my small sun-dappled kitchen, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had led me to this point. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds outside seemed to mock the chaos that swirled within me. The decision to close the joint account had been made in the heat of a moment, yet the repercussions felt like they would reverberate for a lifetime. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was some final test, a trial by fire that would determine whether I was truly capable of stepping out from under the shadow of my past. The days that followed felt surreal, as if I were navigating through a dreamscape where everything was just slightly out of focus. I found myself replaying the events over and over in my mind, each time dissecting them with the precision of a surgeon. Had there been another way? Could I have found some middle ground that allowed me to protect my financial standing without upending his plans? These questions haunted me, lurking in the corners of my mind like unwelcome guests. I was no stranger to guilt. It was an old companion, one that had nestled in my heart ever since the first cracks appeared in our marriage. There was guilt over the dissolution of what was once a loving partnership, guilt over the impact it had on our children, and now guilt over this latest act of defiance. But alongside the guilt was a burgeoning sense of empowerment, a flicker of self-worth that had been absent for far too long. For years, I had allowed myself to be swept along by the currents of my ex-husband's wishes, my own needs and desires submerged beneath the weight of his expectations. But closing the account felt like a declaration, a statement that I would no longer be held hostage by a past that didn't serve me. It was a decision born of necessity, yes, but also of a newfound resolve to prioritize my well-being and that of my children. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes in my life. The sense of dread that had once accompanied every phone call from the bank or unexpected text from my ex started to dissipate. I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. There was still much to do, new bank accounts to open, financial plans to reassess. But for the first time in years, I felt capable of tackling these challenges head-on. My children, perceptive as ever, noticed the shift in our household dynamic. There was a renewed sense of energy in our interactions, a lightness that hadn't been present in far too long. We spent more time together, exploring the countryside and engaging in activities that had been sidelined by the stress of the past. Their laughter, pure and unrestrained, was a balm to my weary soul. In quiet moments, when the house was still and the world outside seemed to pause, I allowed myself to dream of the future. A future where I was no longer bound by the constraints of a marriage that had ceased to nurture either of us. A future where my children could see their mother as a strong, independent woman who had fought for her happiness and emerged victorious. Of course, there were still hurdles to overcome. My ex-husband was not one to let things go lightly, and I knew there would be fallout from my decision. But I was prepared to face whatever came our way, fortified by a sense of purpose that had been rekindled by this act of self-assertion. In the end, the question of whether I was the villain in this story felt less important. What mattered more was that I was finally living life on my own terms, unencumbered by the chains of the past. It was a journey I hadn't asked for, but one that had ultimately led me to a place of strength and resilience. With each passing day, I grew more certain that closing the account had been the right decision. It was a catalyst for change, one that had set me on a path towards healing and self-discovery. And for that, I was grateful. Even if it meant I would always be the villain in someone else's story, I had finally become the hero of my own. The days stretched into weeks, and the inevitable confrontation with my ex-husband loomed larger on the horizon. I knew he would return from his trip to a financial mess, and I braced myself for the storm that was sure to follow. But somewhere deep inside, there was a quiet strength, a voice that reassured me I had done what was necessary. It was the same voice that had, over the years, whispered encouragement when I doubted my decisions, urging me to trust in my ability to navigate through life's complexities. I remember the day he called me after returning from Italy. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, the smell of sautéed onions filling the kitchen, when my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I hesitated. The memories of countless arguments, of conversations that spiraled into blame and resentment, flashed through my mind. But then I took a deep breath and answered, ready to face whatever accusation or frustration he would throw my way. His voice was a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You closed the account?" he asked, his tone laced with incredulity, as though the idea of me taking such decisive action was beyond comprehension. I confirmed it, my voice steady, though my heart raced with the adrenaline of confrontation. What was I supposed to do? Leave it open and let my credit get ruined? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm but firm. You had 5 years to sort this out, and I couldn't wait any longer. There was a pause, a silence heavy with all the things left unsaid between us. In that silence, I could almost hear the gears in his mind turning, trying to come to terms with this new reality where I was no longer the compliant partner he could easily dismiss. His next words were less about the account and more about our shared history, a barrage of grievances that had been simmering beneath the surface for too long. I listened, letting him vent, all the while maintaining the resolve that had guided me through this decision. As he spoke, I realized that the argument was less about the account and more about the shift in our dynamic, the fact that I was no longer willing to play the role he had assigned me. As the conversation wound down, I found myself surprisingly calm. I had expected to feel guilt, anger, perhaps even regret. But instead there was a sense of closure, as if this was the final chapter in a book that had already been set aside. "Look, this was never about making things difficult for you," I said, my voice softening. "It was about protecting myself and the kids. You know that." He sighed, a sound heavy with resignation, and I knew that while he might not understand my actions, he could no longer deny the necessity behind them. We ended the call on a tentative note, not quite friends, but no longer adversaries either. A fragile truce in the aftermath of our long conflict. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the conversation. There was a part of me that wished things could have been different, that our partnership could have endured. But life rarely follows the script we imagine, and sometimes the only path forward is one that requires us to leave parts of our past behind. I often wondered how my children would perceive these events when they were old enough to understand. Would they see it as an act of defiance, or as a necessary step in our journey towards a better future? I hoped they would come to understand that strength sometimes means making difficult choices, and that true empowerment lies in taking control of one's own narrative. As I moved forward, I embraced the possibility of new beginnings. I took up hobbies that had long been neglected, rediscovering passions that had once defined me. I surrounded myself with friends and family who supported my journey, and I learned to appreciate the quiet moments of solitude that allowed me to reflect and recharge. And in those moments, I found peace. A peace born not from the absence of conflict, but from the knowledge that I had finally chosen to live authentically, guided by my own values and aspirations. In the end, the decision to close the account was more than a financial maneuver. It was a declaration of independence, a commitment to a future unshackled by the past. And as I looked out over the vast expanse of possibilities that lay before me, I knew that whatever challenges awaited, I was ready to meet them head on, with a heart that was open and a spirit that was unbreakable. A few weeks after the call with my ex, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had taken over the past 5 years. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the sun streaming through the kitchen window as I sipped my coffee and watched the world outside slowly come to life. Birds chirped in the distance, their songs a reminder of the simplicity and beauty that still existed despite the turbulence I had faced. In those serene moments, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. There was a time when the thought of standing up to my ex would have filled me with dread. But now it was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer trapped in a cycle of fear and uncertainty. I had taken control of my life, and with that came a newfound sense of empowerment. The decision to close the joint account was a turning point, a catalyst for change that had forced me to confront the unresolved issues between us. It was difficult, yes, but necessary. And as I sat there, reflecting on the choices I had made, I knew that I had done the right thing. Not just for myself, but for my children as well. Speaking of my children, they were my greatest motivation through it all. Their laughter, their innocence, and their boundless curiosity about the world around them reminded me daily of why I had to be strong. I wanted to be a role model for them, to show them that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard. I wanted them to see that life is about making choices, and sometimes those choices require courage and resilience. One evening, while tucking them into bed, my youngest asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Mum, are you happy?" It was such a simple question, yet it carried so much weight. I paused, looking into their bright eyes, and realized that this was my chance to show them the truth. "I am," I replied, my voice steady. "Happiness isn't always about having everything go perfectly. It's about feeling at peace with the decisions you make and knowing that you're doing the best you can for yourself and those you love." They seemed satisfied with my answer, snuggling deeper into their blankets as I kissed them goodnight. As I left their room, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me. It was moments like these that reminded me of the importance of authenticity and living life on my own terms. In the months that followed, I continued to rebuild and redefine my life. I delved deeper into personal projects that had been shelved during the chaos of my marriage. I started a small vegetable garden in the backyard, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing something from seed to bloom. It was therapeutic, a tangible reminder of growth and renewal. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the more isolating years of my relationship. We shared laughter and stories, bonding over the trials and triumphs of life. These friendships were a lifeline, a testament to the enduring strength of human connection. And through it all, there was an underlying theme of acceptance of the past, with all its imperfections and struggles. Acceptance of the present, with its challenges and opportunities. And acceptance of the future, with its unknowns and infinite potential. Looking back, I realized that the journey I had embarked upon was not just about closing a bank account. It was about opening myself up to a world of possibilities, about finding the courage to rewrite my story and live authentically. It was about discovering the strength that had always been within me, waiting to be unleashed. As I ventured into this new chapter of my life, I carried with me the lessons I had learned, the importance of self-advocacy, the power of resilience, and the beauty of embracing change. I knew there would be obstacles ahead, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced one of the hardest decisions of my life and come out on the other side stronger and more confident. And so, with hope in my heart and determination in my steps, I walked forward, ready to embrace whatever the future held. This was my story, and I was finally the author of my own destiny. In the weeks that followed, my resolve only grew stronger. Life has a way of testing our limits, and as I navigated this new terrain, I encountered further challenges that tested my newfound independence. My ex's vacation to Italy came and went, and with it came a slew of emails and messages, none of them friendly. He was, unsurprisingly, furious. The closure of the joint account had thrown a wrench into his plans, and the inconvenience had him scrambling to set up his financial affairs anew. At first I felt a pang of guilt. It wasn't that I wanted to make his life difficult, but I couldn't continue to sacrifice my own peace and stability for his convenience. Each message from him was like a small tempest, stirring up old insecurities and doubts. But I reminded myself of the necessity of my choices. I had given him ample time, ample warning. His predicament was a consequence of his own inaction. During this period, I leaned heavily on my support network. Friends and family were quick to remind me of my strength and the importance of prioritizing my well-being. I found myself having long conversations over the phone where I could vent my frustrations and receive the encouragement I needed to stay the course. These moments were vital as they helped ground me and reaffirm my decisions. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the storm began to subside. My ex managed to sort out his financial affairs, though not without much grumbling and passive-aggressive remarks. Yet, as his messages became less frequent, I noticed a change within myself. The anxiety that had once gnawed at the edges of my consciousness began to dissipate, replaced by a steady calm. It was during one of these quieter days that I received a message from him that was different from the rest. It was brief, almost curt, but it bore an unexpected apology. "I guess I should have taken care of the account sooner," it read. "Sorry for the trouble." It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. An acknowledgement, however reluctant, of the validity of my actions. I didn't feel the need to reply, choosing instead to let his words linger in the silence, a testament to the shifts that had occurred, not just within our dynamic, but within myself. The experience had taught me a valuable lesson about boundaries. For so long, I had allowed others to dictate the terms of my life, afraid of the repercussions if I dared to assert my needs. But now, standing on the other side of this ordeal, I realized that boundaries were not barriers. They were bridges to a life lived with intention and respect. As the seasons changed, and the world around me moved, from spring to the vibrant hues of summer, I found myself embracing the beauty of the present moment. The garden I had nurtured began to bloom with life, a colorful tapestry of flowers and vegetables that mirrored my own journey of growth. Each day I would spend time tending to it, finding peace in the rhythmic simplicity of nature. In the quiet moments of solitude, I reflected on my path with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength I had discovered, and for the future that lay ahead, uncharted and full of promise. My children, ever perceptive, picked up on the changes too. They seemed more at ease, more secure in the knowledge that their mother was happy and whole. We spent our days exploring the world together, creating memories that would anchor us in times of uncertainty. Their laughter was a balm, a reminder of the joy that could be found in the simplest of things. Looking back, the decision to close that joint account was a pivotal moment, one that had set into motion a chain of events that would alter the course of my life. It was more than a financial decision. It was a declaration of my right to live freely, guided by my own values and dreams. And as I stood on the cusp of a new chapter, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life, with all its complexities and challenges, was a journey of continual growth and discovery. I was ready to embrace it, ready to write the next part of my story with courage and hope. This was my life, and for the first time in a long time, it felt truly mine. Subscribe for more stories.